Hi, so in this video I'm going to be talking about how the structure of the skin allows it to carry out its 6 major functions, and also how the nervous system allows the skin to regulate our body temperature. The function of the skin is protection. And so the skin is split up into 3 layers: the epidermis, the dermis, and then the hypodermis. And the epidermis is furthermore split into 4 to 5 layers, and so this causes the skin to have a lot of protection. The middle layer, or the dermis layer, is made up of the reticular and the papillary layers, and the reticular layer has collagen fibers, and these collagen fibers add both strength and resiliency to the skin, which are vital in protection. Langerhans cells are also present, and these are macrophages that activate the immune system to carry out a response for protection. And the UVB that we feel outside, that radiation also is important because it activates the p53 transcription factor, which in turn allows for genes that stimulate the melanin producing hormone, or MSH, to be produced. And so when this is produced, melanin is the melanocytes, they produce melanin, and melanin is a pigment that in turn protects us from harmful UV radiation. Lastly, the hair on our scalp, it's important to protect us from physical trauma, heat and sunlight, and also heat. The second section of the skin is body temperature regulation. And so whenever it's cold, the hair on our skin is there to warm us. The goosebumps, that they are activated by the erector pillae muscle, which is attached to our hair follicle, and so whenever it's cold, we have goosebumps, which help heat us. The sweat that leaves our body through the epicrine and eccrine glands are also vital in helping us cool down whenever it's too hot. So whenever it's hot, the heat we generate is transferred to water, and this heat is used to break the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules, which in turn allows for water to evaporate by sweat, and that also allows the heat to escape from our bodies and allows us to cool down. When it's cold, the smooth muscle and the blood vessel also contracts. This causes blood to move away from the top of our skin and goes more towards our core to help keep us warm. So the skin also functions in cutaneous sensation, and this is done in a variety of different ways. First of all, the Merkel cells in the columnar tissue of the epidermis, they are responsible for acting as touch receptors. The free nerve endings, they also sense touch, pain, and temperature, and the Meissner's corpuscles sense the quality of touch specifically. The Pacinian corpuscles sense pressure, and the Ruffini corpuscles sense temperature. Specifically, the end bulbs of Cross sense the cold. The hair on our skin also functions to sense when insects are crawling on our skin, and there are a lot of exoreceptors for touch. The function of the skin is metabolic function, and so the UV radiation from outside is used by our bodies to make vitamin D, and this is specifically done because the UV radiation allows cholesterol to be converted into vitamin D3. The skin also acts as a blood reservoir. The skin's blood vessels contain about 5% of our total body's blood. Lastly, but certainly not the least, the skin also functions in excretion. A lot of nitrogenous waste leave the body through our sweat, and so the epicrine glands, they secrete pheromones, lipids, proteins, and waters into the hair follicle that they're attached to, and this is responsible for our body's odors, which also function in identity and communication. The eccrine glands, another sweat gland, they secrete water, salt, and metabolic waste through our pores, which is a lot of how excretion happens whenever we're hot. The nervous system also interacts with the skin in regulating our body temperature. So whenever it's hot, the body temperature rising is the stimulus. And so what happens is that in the hypothalamus, there's a group of neurons that are set to a specific temperature. They have a standard, and this is because there's a pattern of electrical signals that set the standard in sync with a particular kinetic energy. And so whenever the sensory neuron detects a rise in temperature, the TRP proteins, which are embedded in the neuron membranes, they have ion channels that open and when the temperature is in a certain range. And this sends a signal to the thalamus, which in turn goes to the hypothalamus, and this tells the neurons in the preoptic area in the anterior part of the hypothalamus what's happening. And so when it's hot, this temperature difference between the hypothalamus neurons and the sensory neurons causes a response, and a motor neuron travels down the ventral side of the spinal cord to help cool us down. The same pathway is followed when it's cold, except the difference is that the response instead is the erector pillae muscle causes the hair to stand up on our skin and goosebumps form. In addition, chili powder or anything spicy acts as fake heat, and that's because the capsaicin in the chili powder, it activates thermal sensors and pain receptors or neuroreceptors, and this causes TRP proteins to respond in the same way that it does when it's hot.